sort of starter, kind of like a way to kind of get to know people. I actually did it on purpose.
Yeah, no, I figured. I mean, I've started doing things wrong on purpose, just in life in general. You know, tripping over in the street, spilling drinks on people. I think that's the way
Conversation
forward.
starter.
Yeah, exactly. If you spill a
Nice.
drink on someone,
Well, you've got to talk to them in some way.
you've got to start a conversation with them. Oh, I'm really sorry. Well, you don't have to say sorry, I guess, but yeah, it's a nice way to start. And then you find out all about them.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, nice to meet you, Lawrence.
Nice to meet you too. I've seen some of your lovely tweets, so yeah, it's great to finally talk to you.
Oh, you too. You too. How are you doing? All right.
Yeah, I've been doing okay. I mean, you might as well. Should we just start talking now?
Yeah. I've hit record, so yeah.
Yeah, I have too. Yes, obviously it's been a very weird year. I mean, how would you sum it up in one word? Like, apart from the word unprecedented, because we've heard that too many times, unprecedented. I mean, how would you sum up if you could pick one word?
Wow, what a question!
Wow, that's it. Wow,
that's going to be my word. Yeah,
wow.
I mean, that is a really good question, isn't it? So for me, I think the word that keeps kind of coming back over and over again in different ways is value or values. And I think when I think back over 2020, I can definitely sort of see that we've all been asked to sort of stop, reflect and pause around what really matters to us. What are our values, not just as an individual, but as a world? Like, what kind of world do we want to live in? What do we value as individuals in terms of like work-life balance, nature, friendships, all that kind of stuff? And also how do other people value us? Like, how do we negotiate friendships and relationships and work sort of connection? So for me, I think it's all very much around that word values and what we actually value. So
nice.
I think that's really great. Actually, I hadn't really thought about values in general. Like, I think it's a word we don't use in the right way sometimes. I think perhaps.
I think, do you know what? I think it's often seen as an old-fashioned word
Mm.
or a word that isn't really relevant for nowadays. But I think that's because we've got a lot of associations in our brains around what that means and what that looks like. And perhaps we sort of think back to being at school and someone telling us what our values should be. But actually, I think this year we really have all been asked to stop and think about, you know, what really matters. What was I doing before? What was my life looking like? What was our world looking like? And actually kind of stepping out of that and making a choice about what kind of things did we get it right? Do we want to change? And what are we going to do kind of moving forward? So I think we need to bring back value and values as a sort of a word for right now, because it's never been more important, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Has it been ostracized, that word, slightly by, I'm just thinking like where we use that word, I'm just thinking about it now off the top of my head. We use it in terms of getting more for less. So, you know, like, it's like pound shop, isn't it? It's kind of
three for the price of two.
Yeah, it's used in it's a marketing tool, isn't it? It's used as and it's used in that way. And like you say, I think we need to sort of there's been certain words in the past that have changed and evolved, and we need to kind of that's one of those we need to sort of to take some control over again and use it in a different way, maybe.
Yeah, it certainly made me appreciate certain things that I sort of took for granted, I think, this year, like, for sure. Like, even just, obviously the NHS are brilliant, but just really, really come into a position where I really appreciate what they're doing and being on the front line and knowing nurses as well, and just knowing how, like, it's affecting their, like, mental health going through this. Like, I had, one nurse that I know up in Epsom, and she's like, going really through a really rough time sort of with her mental health, just because she's dealing with all these COVID patients. Just really appreciate that they're being on the front line and dealing with that. But then just other things that, that have been cut off, just like even just appreciating the things they took for granted, like the gym and just like the cinema and a restaurant or a pub, or, just going to the theatre or something like that. You just really, although I always really enjoy those things, I've just really appreciated how much they're important to me, because the fact that I just having them all cut off at the same time has just been like, wow, these are kind of my places that I go for escapism and go to kind of tune off, and to have it all cut off at the same time is just really really been interested in terms of, well, make it, like, to go back to value, really valuing them.
That is so true. And do you know,
Rhada, we've just lost you for a minute.
Yeah, we've lost you.
Your audio went, and you were just saying something really great as well.
There you go.
You're back. You're back.
am I back? Oh, for
Yeah.
you. So I was just going to say that actually I've always loved going to the cinema kind of on my own. You know, sometimes just kind of getting like a Nando's before, going to sit in the cinema, choosing the film that I want with no one else to sort of tell me what. An amazing thing that I always loved, but like you say, totally right, Lawrence, like this year, the fact that those very simple things or things we took for granted have been sort of taken away from us, it's been really interesting, hasn't it, to really think about what on earth we were doing, what we enjoyed and why, and actually how sometimes we make everything so complicated and we make things, you know, so kind of that they have to be on a grand scale or they have to be big. I have to be going on a huge holiday to be happy or to have something to look forward to. And I think we really are kind of being asked to go back to basics and really be like, actually, do you know what? I just want to go and have a hot chocolate with my friend in a cafe.
Yeah.
Or go and sit on my friend's sofa and watch, you know, Friday night TV and have a pizza, you know. So I think it's been really challenging, but I think if we can remember these lessons that we've been taught this year about those kind of things, I think actually it will be really good for us and really good for our world as a whole as well.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah, anything that you're sort of missing in particular, Giles, at the minute? I can't hear you now, Giles.
Oh, Giles, your audio's gone now.
Oh, there we go. It cut off a minute ago. I've got loads of editing now for me. What am I missing? Well, my little coffee shop where I go and do writing has obviously been closed this last lockdown. I went and got a takeaway this morning, and obviously they're opening up this week. But yeah, missing that, yes, and just general interaction with you know, the general. I like hanging out with the general public, sitting in a cafe and watching the world go by, that sort of stuff. I suppose, like people watching. I'm missing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, hopefully the ending's in sight now with the vaccine news, but then you still get people that are like these anti-vaxxers and people protesting and things like that. Do you worry that that's going to cause a few problems going forward in terms of people just refusing to do what they're told? I suppose, like, you know, we've got the solution now to kind of get back to some form of normality, but people kind of don't want that either.
I think it's like,
sorry,
no, you go first.
No, I was going to say, it feels like it's like a lot of these things. I think there's a minority that feel this way, but they make a lot of noise, and I think it's that the amount of noise they generate. It feels like there's perhaps more people doing it than there is. So I think, yeah, there is a minority of people that are sort of will always be conspiracy theorists and, you know, anti this, that, and the other. But I think you have to think that they are generally in a minority, and it's just that they're shouting the loudest.
And I think also it's been interesting, hasn't it, this year, because I think this year in so many different ways we've really sort of seen the whole spectrum of opinions, people's attitude to risk, people's ideas, where people are getting their news from, where people are getting their information from. And I think that whole issue of kind of trust and connection, and actually how people get their information and how information is communicated, has actually been another really big topic, hasn't it, this year? Which again was something that was bubbling under the surface for a long time, but this issue obviously has really brought it to the surface. So again, aside from kind of values, I think again this year has been very much about the kind of issues and problems and things that were going on for decades or sometimes even centuries before this, that we all knew were there, we all knew were bubbling under the surface, but we could sort of stick our heads, you know, under the duvet and ignore. But this year has been the year when we cannot ignore any of these problems for any longer. And it's been the year really where we've all been stopped in our tracks to say, you know, this is a problem, you know, this needed to be sorted out, and now you have to sort it out. And I think there are so many topics and areas that relate to that. So I think we're all being asked to again sort of stop and think about what kind of world do we want, where have we gone amiss, and what can we do now kind of moving forward to try and make those things a bit better.
No, absolutely. Because, you know, I think earlier this year, I really noticed, like, I felt like there was really big divides in opinions, and for whether it would have been Brexit, whether it would have been, you know, your thoughts on the coronavirus, your thoughts on Donald Trump, your thought, you know, and then there was this the tragic thing that happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the death of I can't remember his name now, George Floyd. And yeah, you know, that was horrific what happened to him, but it caused a lot of division, and there, you know, and there was things like this. But you kind of hope, I suppose, now that as horrific those things were, that we're slowly, hopefully, trying to get into some kind of unified state, I suppose. You know, with Joe Biden, hopefully, in the US now can hopefully try and bring the American people back together. Although there's lots of anger with the Black Lives Matter movement, there seems to be a lot more sort of diplomatic way they're sort of dealing with it now, rather than you know, the understandable anger that they were protesting at the time. And even, you know, with Brexit, I like to think that hopefully, maybe even with Joe Biden as president now, they'll be able to kind of go back to the table with the European Union, because he's very pro, you know, sort of unifying people together as well. So do you kind of hope, I suppose, like next year we kind of bring these divisions sort of back to some sort of togetherness?
Do you know what? I wrote a social media post. I think it was back in January, and it was mainly related to the environment, because I was feeling so kind of impassioned by watching what was happening to nature. And I think my post said something like, you know, first of all, nature whispered, then it spoke, now it's shouting. When are we going to stop and actually listen to what it's telling us? And I think that sort of almost that framework is really holds into so many issues that you've just discussed, Lawrence, around what's come up this year. And it's that thing, isn't it, where, and we all do this as individuals, where, for example, we will keep repeating the same kinds of behaviour in a certain theme that we know are self-destructive, or we know don't actually help us, because we're not really prepared to stop and look at the actual deeper issue that's causing that behaviour. But hopefully at some point we'll learn from that, and we'll kind of stop and go, okay, I've learned my lesson from that experience, let's not do that again. And I almost feel like as a world we're being asked to say, listen, you've kind of carried on these same kind of behaviours for centuries. When are you actually going to stop and not do it again? So that's not to be depressing, that's more to try and reframe things, I suppose, as a really important moment in history, I think, and a really important opportunity, a moment for opportunity to actually make something change, and not just say it with words, but actually mean it and actually do something. And I think if we can try to remember and not forget and push all of these things down again for it to happen in another few years, then I think, you know, lots of things could actually get better. And like you were saying, Lawrence, lots of things, people can actually be unified, and things can actually hopefully move forward that are good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with you know, the news of Marcus Rashford this year, I mean, that was a really nice thing. You know, footballers get a lot of stick, don't they? But the fact that Marcus Rashford sort of did that and sort of was trying to, you know, sort of help schools and younger children that live in bad conditions. But you know, it was frustrating, I suppose, that he was kind of met with sort of hesitation at first, right? That was a bit frustrating.
Yeah, and then as a whole kind of, you know, well, not a whole group of people, but some people saying, oh, you know, why is he doing this? He's doing this for his own agenda and to get publicity. And you're like, oh, come on. Like, seriously? Yeah. Like, I think, you know, when you come up against comments like that, you're just like, do you know what? You need to just stop and just breathe and just deal with whatever is causing you to be so unhappy. Because for someone to criticize, you know, actions like that, which are absolutely from an authentic place, a kind place, a place where someone has really gone through something themselves, really understands and really wants to make a difference. For someone to criticize that is like, I'm sorry. Yeah. How could that even be a thing?
I know. It's baffling. Yeah. You say something, Giles, sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate what Rhada was saying about, yeah, like, I think there's just no justification for any assault on Marcus Rashford. I think, you know, he was like, it was the kind of epitome of goodness that he was trying to promote and do. So I think, yeah, again, I think, you know, just going back to my earlier point about there being a minority that like to shout the loudest, I think, you know, we have to recognise that it is often a minority, and you just have to kind of block them out a little bit sometimes.
And also, I think a really important lesson for everybody to sort of say that actually, if you want to change something, and you believe in it and it's the right thing to do, then you do it. And even if people criticize you or they say this, that, and the other, as long as you know in your heart of hearts why you're doing it, the fact you're doing it for a good reason, don't let anyone stop you from making a change in the world. And I think that's really important for every single person to hear, because again, a lot of the things that you were talking about, Lawrence, in terms of bringing people back together, is going to be a sort of culmination of lots of individual people's actions. So if people are frightened about doing something because they might be criticised, then that's going to stop them from doing it. So just for people to know that, you know, if you're doing it from a good place and you believe in it, then do it, because I'm sure there'll be someone who'll criticise you, but frankly, who cares?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's hard to kind of think. I mean, Giles, you're known, and you, Rhada, you're known for being very positive people on Twitter. But what are kind of the positive things that have happened this year that you guys can be like, well, you know what, we could kind of take a nice thing out of 2020 and be like, well, this kind of, you know, this was a really positive thing that happened this year. What kind of, are there any sort of stories that happened this year that kind of comes to mind when you're thinking, yeah, that was a really nice moment of 2020?
Well, getting to know
Charles
Rhada.
Go first.
There you go.
I'm going to let Charles go first because he's king of kindness. I might be maybe like the court jester.
No, not at all. No, well, no, honestly, like meeting, like, to be honest, meeting lots of, connecting and meeting lots of new people. Rhada, Lawrence, yourself.
Yeah.
I know we knew each other before, but yeah, just kind of getting to know more people better, and actually, in some respects, connecting more. Even though we've obviously been disconnected, we haven't been able to see each other in real life, but actually making far more connections actually because of the way we've been working, and that's been amazing, and having proper conversations with people. And I say, even though we haven't been able to have like conversations in the real world as such, just having those conversations at all has been really important to me. So that's been a big thing for me. Striking up conversations, making new connections, making new friends, lots of new friends, and that's been a really beautiful part of this year, I think, for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Giles on that. I think also, you know, for years and years, we've talked about making sort of emotional health and mental health part of everyday conversation. And although obviously people have meant that, I think a lot of that, or some of that, has just been words. Whereas I think actually this year, it really has, everyone's been affected in different ways, and obviously everyone reacts differently. Everyone has got their own specific challenges and circumstances. But I do think that actually this year has been an opportunity where we have all more authentically asked how people are. We've more authentically stopped and thought, how am I? What's going on for me? And so I think in that respect, mental health as something which affects and can affect and touches everyone every single day, which it does, has become much more of a conversation, but a conversation with meaning rather than just a conversation that sort of is on one day of the year and then stops. So that's been a really good opportunity for people to be really honest and really start thinking about what it actually means and prioritizing that. And I think also probably the idea that we've all had a chance to really think about what day-to-day things actually help us feel better. So things like nature, like birdsong, like, you know, calling your friend and having a chat with them, all those really basic things, like having a bath, like listening to a lovely bit of music or reading a book. I think we've really been brought back to that sort of simple thing around what actually does make me feel good, and is it what I thought it was before, in terms of like external outcomes or achievements or whatever society tells us should make us feel good, or is it something more basic, more essential, something that we actually knew when we were little but we've actually forgotten? So I think it's created a space for us all to review that and think actually what is really the kind of things that we want back in our lives every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found you know, just you'd walk the dog in general before lockdown and things. Just it felt like a bit of a chore, like, oh, I need to set a dog out and stuff. But over this last year, because, you know, that was like a form of exercise and being able to do something, was going out to, just for me to go out to walk the dog, I've sort of like really ventured, like trying to find out different walks, longer walks, like going to different parts in the country, going for dog walks, meeting like little dog walking groups. And that has like such an improvement on my mental health. Like I feel good after like a really long dog walk. There was the start of the pandemic, I think lots of people were just kind of Netflixed out, just kind of felt like they completed Netflix and you're watching everything on Netflix.
They've gone to the next level of Netflix, whatever that is.
Advanced Netflix.
Yeah, like level 1 was the Tiger King, wasn't it, when that was out? And then you kind of like start completing more series.
I've never quite got over that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I haven't actually seen that, but
wow.
It's a trip.
Yeah, I've heard.
It was a bit crazy. But like, I remember I was at the start of the year when it was the lockdown situation. My mental health was starting to get a bit rubbish, but I think that's because I just felt like I was having so much screen time, just isolating myself more and more. And the more I went outside and just like, I'm not going to take my phone or anything like that. I'm going to leave my phone at home and I'm just going to go out for like hour and a half or whatever and just go on a really nice long country dog walk. And like doing that regularly has made me feel great, just being able to do that stuff.
And I think also that we can't always do it, but if we are able to do it, there comes a closening or a strengthening of our relationship with ourselves, in that we start to trust ourselves to kind of make good choices for ourselves in that moment. Now, whether or not that is to go for a walk, or whether or not it's to like give up and go back to bed, or have a cry, or bring someone and tell someone how you're feeling, they're all just as good choices for ourselves in that moment. But I think sometimes, when we're really busy, we're rushing around, we kind of lose our connection with ourselves, and we don't really tune in with who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it. Yeah. So I think, again, we talk a lot about connection with other people and kindness to other people, but I think it's also another layer of stopping and saying, okay, well, maybe this year I've learned to trust myself a bit more, or to understand who I am and what I want and what helps me. And so I think that relationship with ourselves is actually really, really important to be nurtured this year, because again, it's only when we get that right that we can then help other people. So super important. I mean, I used to commute probably about 3 hours a day before the pandemic, and then this year I've been sitting there thinking, what was I doing? What was going on there? Like, I used to wake up, drive to the station, walk to the station, get a train, get a tube, go to work, do the same reverse, and then maybe rush off to the gym, and then come back and kind of have like 2 or 3 hours in the evening. And I was thinking, God, what was I doing? What was going on?
What were you doing?
I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes those commutes are really, really useful, because I used to read a lot, or relax, or sleep, or listen to music, or whatever. But I did think to myself, wow, this, since I haven't been commuting so much, I've really managed to do more exercise, get outside more, and be a little bit more aware of actually, how I'm sleeping, how much I'm sleeping, for example. But it's also not just that. It's not just the time. It's the automated robotic mode that sometimes we can get into when we're used to doing something over and over again. And then once that becomes automatic and robotic, it loses its joy and it loses its spontaneity. So I think that's also been an interesting thing that's come from this year.
I say, do you think it's generally good to break routines regularly, like whatever your routine is?
I do, actually, because I think it keeps your brain flexible. It keeps kind of your neurons firing in different ways. It makes us also less rigid, less scared of change, because a lot of the time, I think when we get older, people are less willing to take chances or risks, often because they've got responsibilities, which is totally understandable, but not even necessarily big changes or big risks. So we get into habits, and once we get into habits of, driving the same way, the same route, parking in the same place, getting the same time train, it just kind of makes us a little bit more less open to change, less open to opportunity, and less open to stopping and looking around us and seeing what's happening. I mean, I myself also, but lots of other people, on those train platforms, you walk down the platform, you're on your phone, you're swiping, you're not really looking, you think you know which platform it's coming from, you try and go to the exact same carriage on the train, so get the same kind of seat. And after a while, I think any kind of habit that is very rigid it just drains and sucks out all the life energy, all of the spontaneity, the joy, the openness. You start to not look at the trees properly or the detail or notice the small things. And that's when I think sometimes we can get a bit burnt out and we start to think, well, where's the joy? And then we start to become a bit flat.
Because I mean, your body physically adapts to that as well. Like if you have that routine that's just going and going and going, right? Because I remember even as like a young lad when I was acting, like so I'd be doing 2 shows a day. There'd be a show at 7:30 at night, and you'd sort of 10 o'clock, 10:30 come off stage, and then you'd kind of, but your adrenaline's like way up here, so you can't go to sleep. And so like when I've stopped on certain shows that I was performing, whether it be panto musicals or whatever it was, I'd be kind of just like, my body would just have adapted to like being so nocturnal. And like I remember, like, I mean, addiction, you can be addicted to all sorts of things. I was addicted to Red Bull. I used to have to like rely on Red Bull.
It's dangerous, that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. To get through a day, I'd have like 2 or 3 of the big cans daily, because I felt like, well, I'm on like 3 or 4 hours sleep, and I'm like, well, I need to go out on stage, so I need to be able to stock up on these Red Bulls to have the energy that I need to do my thing, and then kind of crash after. But no, I did really notice that like your body really does adapt to the more you have the same routine. The more regular you keep that, for sure.
I think also when we become rigid about what we're doing, we also are less flexible with other people as well. So we expect them to behave in the same ways, do the same things. If they want to do something different, we're kind of, we're so used to things being structured in a certain way, we may not like it. So I think it's also important to not just to be open for ourselves, but important to be open to other people and how we interact with them. Because again, relationships can get very sort of stale and habitual, and in terms of what people do, and that also is difficult, isn't it? And particularly obviously this year, in terms of everyone being, around the people that are living with a lot more, that also has its own challenges, I think, as well.
I'm just thinking about that poor person that was going to sit in the seat that you wanted to occupy every day, and like you sort of glaring at them, saying, "Oh, that's my seat. You've ruined my routine."
Like, yeah.
So I'm one of those people who was like, right, so how can I like make the most of my time? So I would always go to the last carriage and the kind of like the last seat, so I had less of a walk on the other end of the thing, because I thought I might as well use my time now to walk down the train than use my time at the other end.
You were micromanaging your whole morning, weren't you?
I know. You see, it's all of us have an opportunity to stop and think, what was I doing? Why was I doing that? And actually, I mean, commuting in London on the trains and tubes, there'd be often times when I would stop, and I'd look at people and they'd be running to get this train, when actually there was maybe a train in like 2 minutes time.
Yeah.
But they would have the look on their face like a kind of a wild beast was chasing them, and if they didn't get it, then everything was over. And I remember looking at this kind of panicked look in some people's face and thinking, wow, what are we all doing?
Yeah.
That was before the pandemic, and don't get me wrong, I've run for trains as well, but it was really interesting when we start to think about what are we doing, how are we behaving, and why. And does it all matter now?
That's funny about the tube, actually, because I always think I'm always quite, I don't know, lapsadaisical about being on the tube, and I just always I couldn't fathom the fact that people were rushing all the time. I'm thinking there is another one in 1 minute.
Yeah.
And actually that one's going to be less crowded, so I'm going to wait for the next one on purpose. It's funny,
weird,
isn't it, though?
Yeah, it's weird, because even like saying that, I can relate to that. Like, you're coming down the escalators going down to the tube, and you're just no care in the world, just like, just sort of not in a rush. But then you like in a distance, you kind of hear a tube that's coming or approaching. You're like, oh, there's a tube there now, and you start rushing, start like really running down the escalator. Like, I've got to get on this one. There's one here now. And but before I hear that, there's like not a care in the world. But yeah, when do
you know what? I think sometimes you see one person start to move quicker, and then there's like a sort of rush, isn't there, of everybody?
It's kind of like mass consciousness, isn't it? I mean, it's not like Lord of the Flies, obviously.
No, we're not literally like killing each other to get to
oh
it.
my god, quick! Someone else is rushing, and someone else is going for it. And actually, now you sort of sit there and think, what was really going on? So I think it's going to be interesting to see like when things do go back to kind of normal, or people are allowed to do certain things that we used to, is anything going to change? I don't know.
You know, it's one of those things, isn't it? Funny enough, I changed. I mean, I don't go to London a lot these days, but when I haven't been since February, but even before that, I like things like the tube. I'd consciously stopped trying to go on the tube, because I think actually most places in central London you can get to pretty easily on foot, or you know, if you give yourself a bit more time. Certainly the places I was going to, and so I would do that instead, because I just couldn't cope. In a way, it was like a sort of like, I can't cope with the tube, it's too much, unless I'm in a real rush and I'll jump on it. But if I can give myself a bit more time, I can actually walk and it's fine, isn't it? So I think I'd kind of started that. Whether that will, you know, that will cotton on, the streets of London will be like absolutely filled with people walking. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think, do you know what, one of the things early on in the first lockdown that struck me, and it was something that I hope will continue, was like you're saying, like, it's about walking a dog, and just actually, because of the social distancing, actually giving people time to walk past us and being patient, not like trying to barge past or like scoot past quickly, because you know, that moment of patience for letting other people go past you. I remember thinking that was really nice, and how actually that common courtesy might come back into our way of life a little bit more, but who knows.
And you've used another word which is often thought of as old-fashioned alongside with values, is courtesy and respect. So these words are really, really, and kindness, they're really important words, and yet we've kind of almost banished them from our vocabulary kind of in the last, I don't know how many years, but they have almost kind of gone out of fashion. And yet, like you say, courtesy, kindness, values, they're all things that actually make us feel good and actually bring us together as a society. So I almost feel like those words are actually going to have a resurgence. Well, I hope they do. Courtesy is a lovely word. It makes me feel really warm, actually, when you say courtesy.
Me too.
I mean, kindness is so underrated, isn't it? Really, like, you know, you kind of it seems like a sort of everyone kind of goes, "Oh, I'm kind. I'm the kind." Everyone thinks they're a kind person. Everyone just kind of assumes everyone thinks they're kind. But like, you do it is very underrated, because it does not, you know, not only what you're doing is kind for someone, but you have yourself a really good feeling as well. There's been times where I've been on the underground, had an absolute rubbish day, and you know, get off at Marylebone to go to the national rails, and you know, you might see someone that can't speak a word of English but trying to get a pram up the stairs, and just being able to help them or something like that, and just get up a few flights of stairs, and able to say thank you. But like, that rubbish feeling for me, as someone that's just given a few seconds to help out, I feel really good doing that, and that kind of makes me forget the stuff that I had go wrong that day, or where it was kind of irrelevant. I was just actually, I feel pretty good just helping out there and doing that little thing.
And I think the word curious. So I think when we're curious about other people, I mean, often when we say that word, we think, oh, that's being nosy, or someone's kind of sticking their nose into your business. But actually, I think curiosity is also really important to build connection with other people, because when we are curious about someone's story, what's happened to them, what they might have been through, we then can be empathetic, and we then can be kind. So it's only when we're curious about why someone thinks something, why they're saying it, why they might be behaving in a certain way, that we can actually learn their backstory, and then perhaps understand where they're coming from, and not judge, not criticize, but actually kind of connect with them on a real level, which I think is really helpful in terms of, again, making people feel like they can say what they need to say, or they can ask for things that they need at that point in time.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, hopefully the time that we've had where we've not been able to come into close proximity with each other as much as we'd like, hopefully we're going to kind of learn that, you know, we can be more affectionate towards each other, and, you know, it makes us appreciate the values, like you said, about just having those close relationships with people.
I think maybe when all this is over and we're allowed to, it's not just going to be kind of, you know, all these kind of music festivals. Maybe we should create a hug fest.
Free hug signs. That'd be wonderful.
I think we've all missed that a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, Giles, how do you, you know, I've asked you this a few times, I think, but how do you stay so, like, with your tweets and everything like that, you, like, you know, are you quite wary that people might be having like a bit of a rubbish day, and you think, right, I'm going to send out some positivity out there just to let people know that I care?
Am I aware? I think. Well, yeah. I guess. Well, yeah. I guess I am aware that there will be someone, and I guess maybe my tweets are aimed at that person. But there's one person perhaps who's not having a good day, and I get lots of nice messages from people saying, "Oh, I had a few today actually. A couple of people sent me messages saying, DM'd me saying, actually I've been having a bit of a rubbish time lately, and just seeing your tweets come up on my timelines really helped me." So I guess there's a certain consciousness about it, but at the same time, it's just me. I'm just putting out like stuff that I guess maybe it's stuff I'd like to read as well. I mean, I love reading Rhada's tweets. She always puts lots and lots of lovely things and lovely advice, and that always really helps me. So if I can obviously do that in my own way as well, then that's nice.
You definitely do, Giles. I have to say, like, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think I don't know about you, Giles, but sometimes the things that I put out there are either because I've come across maybe a friend or someone I know who's going through a bit of a tough thing or a difficult day, and so you kind of think about them in your mind as you're writing it. Or sometimes it's actually because you need it yourself, and you would love someone to say it to you, and so actually kind of putting it out there is almost sort of signaling, I suppose, to everyone else that if they're feeling that way, they're not kind of by themselves. And I think, Giles, that's why your posts are so great and so well received, because they come from a really authentic place, and you can hear the human voice in them. I think sometimes, again, in sort of our society, I think sometimes help has become a bit formalized, a little bit perhaps medicalized. If you need help, then it's become a sort of thing that is on a web page. And I think actually people are really desperate, not just because of this pandemic, but before that, for a human face, a human voice, for that help to be what it was always at its foundation, which is human. And I think that's why kindness and courtesy and time, things like that, really hit home with people, because at the end of the day, any kind of help starts from that basis of what a human being is, and that human side to actually being that help. It all starts from there, and the rest of it obviously is needed. It comes out in different layers, and there are different branches, but the foundation of it all really is what makes people feel good, and that is being listened, heard to, and being cared for and valued.
And I think why your tweets help me in particularly sometimes, Giles, is because without sounding sexist in any way, is because you're a guy that's saying it, because there's so much toxic masculinity, and think that, oh no, guys can't be like that because that's vulnerable if we put out certain tweets and stuff. But for me personally, seeing your tweets made me think, well, this is great. There's another guy that I can kind of connect with and get more, because I don't feel like I have to hide those feelings in. It feels like it is okay just to kind of express yourself and how you're feeling and how others might be feeling on Twitter. But I think with guys, you like to think it's kind of slowly turning a little bit where guys can express themselves a bit more. But a lot of guys, I think I said to you before, Giles, like I've known sadly 5 people that have took their own life, and one of them was a girl that had a long battle with it. But for the 4 guys I know, it just happened like that. There was no warning. Just couldn't, you never would have thought anything was wrong. So I just think guys have this almost suffocating in silence, so they just kind of keep all these feelings and how they're feeling in because they feel that they have to. So I think it's really, really important to see guys like you on Twitter being able to share stuff like that. Yeah,
that's I'm sorry about your friends. That's devastating. And I mean, there's the statistics show that there's a very high percentage of men under the age of 40 who are taking their own lives. Suicide rates are very high, and I think that's true. I mean, we've seen high profile suicides in recent years. People like Gary Speed, and there's a musician, Chris Cornell, who I'm a massive fan of from Soundgarden, who took his own life a couple of years ago. And again, one of those things where everyone thought he was, there was no signs, and then suddenly he was gone. And Yeah, I think that happens a lot. My wife's father took his own life in his 40s, so we're very aware in our house, and it's always something we talk about quite openly with the children as well. They're fully aware, and I think it's having those conversations. And again, I think it's if I can allow anyone, if any of my tweets sort of resonate with anybody and it allows them to talk about their own feelings, and then that's obviously wonderful. But yeah, there does need to be a lot more done for and high profile people coming forward. I know you've mentioned before, Lawrence, about The Rock and his struggles with mental health, but I think there's a lot of high profile people that could come out and talk about these things more openly, I think would allow the conversation to be better.
And we need to start earlier again in schools, in nursery. That's that whole time, isn't it, when actually a lot of children they get their messages around what's allowed and what's not allowed in terms of their feelings, what they're allowed to express. As a boy, as a girl, as a child, they get those messages really early on. And it can be really subtle things, not just words, but for example, if a child is crying and an adult kind of doesn't necessarily even go and ask them what's happened, or they kind of distract them to something else sometimes. Again, those subconscious messages, not just the actual verbal messages, children take those in and they remember them, and then that sets up the framework for their adult life. So I think, again, it's that whole thing around children being comfortable with their feelings and not waiting to reach that sort of crisis point where we really should not be allowing people to get to, for everybody, which I think is just so important. So I don't know that there isn't, for me, I don't think there's no age is too early to start doing that.
No.
Yeah, it's about just encouraging people to be themselves, isn't it? Like, I can still vividly remember at secondary school having to hide things that I enjoyed because I'd be worried if I'd be teased about it. I was a massive Disney fan at the age as a kid, and I didn't really want to give that up as a teenager, but kind of felt like you had to. I remember, we had our, before the days of the iPads and iPhones, I had my CD player, and I was a massive fan of McFly. The band McFly, because as a teenage guy, I could kind of relate to McFly and the songs as a teenager.
I remember going to see McFly somewhere once.
I really, but it was always referred to as you shouldn't like McFly's music. So I remember going into school with my CD of a Red Hot Chili Peppers album with the McFly CD in, so people would think I was listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers and not McFly, because I'd get to it'd be like, oh, McFly, there's anything wrong with being gay, and it'd be like, McFly, that's gay, you can't like McFly. You as a 12, 13, 14-year-old sort of being thrown at you is not nice, and you kind of think, I don't want anyone sort of thinking my music taste is like this. So I really liked McFly, and I felt like I had to hide the fact that I liked the band McFly, and just keep that to myself. So I think we just need to encourage people more just to be themselves.
It's interesting, Lawrence, actually saying that, because I've got two boys, 13 and 11, and I would say, like, particularly my 13-year-old, who's he's got a really eclectic mix of friends, and they're so accepting of gender, and he had a very close friend who was transitioning as well. So that, and they don't even see it, race, whatever it might be. So I think I'm hoping that the next generations, now obviously that I'm only speaking from personal experience, but from looking at my son and his friendship groups and how accepting they are of one another, I'm like to think that actually there is a new generation of kids that are going to be far more accepting about whatever their mates are into, whatever their friends look like, or what they want to do with their lives. I think there does seem to be a lot more acceptance. So I think it is starting to change. But yeah, I think we obviously need to continue those conversations.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good to know, because it was. Did you ever have to deal with like tough things like that? You felt like you had to hide as a guy at school, or?
Yeah, well, all my friends were really into, it was like the 90s, and all my friends were really into like rave music. So they were going to raves and stuff, and I was into rock music, and you could be ostracized for sort of admitting that you liked Pearl Jam or Nirvana. which, you know, is silly really, but it was just because, I think you get into those friendship groups, don't you? And you if they're all into one particular thing. But I guess, sort of things like that, I guess, happen quite regularly. And actually looking back, there were probably other kids in our year that were ostracized for other reasons. So I mean that's school life is a bit like that sometimes, isn't it? But
and actually I think also it's interesting because I think, you know, unless we realize that, we can actually carry that on into adult life as well. Lots of people that I kind of have come across or know, or sometimes when you're growing up but you're a bit younger, you do start to think to yourself, am I doing what I used to do at school? Am I kind of talking about the same things in this group because I feel like I should, like I want to fit in, like I have to? And so actually, you know, in workplace environments, in different social settings, it's interesting, isn't it, when sometimes you find yourself thinking, you know, sort of, who am I? Who are these people around me? What am I talking about? And one really important kind of indicator of that, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said this, or maybe someone was saying it about the Dalai Lama, is that wherever he went or wherever he goes, he treats everyone in exactly the same way, and he never ever changes who he is, no matter who he is with and where he is. And I think that is a real sign of someone who's really grounded in who they are, and themselves as a person. So it's really interesting just to stop and think, who am I being right now? What role am I playing a role, or I'm actually really being authentic? Because we can carry that on into adult life. It's very easy to identify as a sort of school behavior, but if we're not careful, we can actually carry that on. And I think again this year that's been interesting, because a lot of people I know have sort of paused and thought about their friendship groups, who they're actually in contact with, and kind of really reviewed friendships and connections with people.
It's funny actually, because neither my wife or I drink. We're both teetotal. I've been teetotal since my early 20s, having not had a very good relationship with alcohol. And that is something that often is, what's the best way of putting this? Slightly kind of, there's always a kind of strange reaction when you say that you don't drink. Particularly if you're in a social setting. I mean, it's not obviously not so bad, but with certain people accepting, obviously, but you always get those. Oh, so you're driving? You know, have you got to get up early? It's all those kind of things come out because it's so, you know, obviously it's so accepted in our society.
Or as a woman, people think you're pregnant if you're not
same,
come to that conclusion just because I'm not having a gin and tonic.
Exactly, and so it's a funny one. That's something that I still sometimes, there's been, like, I went on a stag do a few years ago with a very good close friend, and it was awkward. And I hadn't hadn't experienced that for quite a long time, because everyone was getting so pissed and I wasn't. And there was so many people that were inquisitive about it, and it was a very awkward sort of moment. But so I think you're right. I think we still do get those moments in adulthood where we're like, I want, because we all want to be accepted, don't we? At the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to say I am going to go see McFly in May this year. Next year. Well, if I'm allowed to. Me and my university friends, we're going to go. We just said, let's do it. We'll go. We like their music. Let's go.
After 2020, Lawrence, I think you should go and see McFly every single night.
I know. I should go see it. I should go see every night on tour.
I'm going. I'm coming too.
Yeah, we'll be McFly groupies. It'll be great. But no, it'd be it's interesting you say, you know, the situation of alcohol as well, because like I find that with my friends as well, like they don't, you know, so when I was going through sort of problems with my mental health, there'd be points where I knew that alcohol affected my mental health. You know, I'd be doing it, you know, it'd be like, right, I feel rubbish on a Saturday night. I need to feel like I can be social. I need alcohol to be able to do that, because I feel rubbish. I have no energy. I feel like I need to go out and just get drunk and I'll be able to be social. When I was trying to sort of, when I acknowledged alcohol was a problem in terms of like making me feel, although it was a short-term buzz and feeling high, but feeling really rubbish for a few days after that, you know, my mates would kind of be a bit like, well, what's wrong with you? I'm sorry, you know, I'm just going through this difficult period of my mental health and stuff right now. I'd be like, oh, you know, come have a pint, you know, I'll talk about it. It's like, no, I can't go and have a drink, because, you know, yes, it'll make me feel okay for a short amount of time whilst I'm with you and we're watching the football and having a curry or whatever it is. But like it might not even be the day after, but the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the come down I'll have is horrific for my mental health. And it was just kind of them saying, you know, it was kind of, you know, I really felt that was tough with my mates. So they kind of shook it off like, oh, you know, if you're feeling a bit rubbish, come out with the lads, have a few pints, you know, we'll go out, it'll be a good time. But yeah, so, you know, you do kind of get that, I think, from some guys sometimes. They don't understand. Yeah. But, I mean, what do you think have been the really nice points of, if you could pick one nice moment to take, you know, we've had the COVID stuff. So what would be like a really nice moment? Like, I guess for me, like the nicest moment I could think of 2020 is Captain Tom. Yeah. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Oh yeah, Captain Tom was tremendous. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was so inspiring. There have been lots. I mean, on a personal level, I've had lots of great times this year. Actually, as a family, we kind of embraced the particularly the first lockdown. We were all at home together. We kind of realised we're all quite introverted. We quite like being at home. I've had lots of projects on the go, so I've been quite busy. So that's, you know, and I feel very, very grateful for that. So yeah, there's been a lot for me, actually. It's not been, you know, and I'm very lucky. I've got a garden, got a nice house. So, you know, live on the coast and go for nice walks. I've had everything has been pretty okay for me. So I realize that I'm not in the majority in that. Lots of people have had a very challenging year. So I've had lots of things, and I think actually going back to what you were saying about the word that sums up this year, for me, it's reflection and having that time to reflect on all the things that Rhada's talked about, which is, you know, what friendship groups and general relationships with various different things, and, you know, what do I want out of life, and material stuff, do I need this, that and the other to be happy, and all those different things have really come home, and it's been a time to really reflect on all those things and reflect on them as a family as well, not just me reflecting and thinking about myself, but actually as a family. So yeah, and in lots of respects, from a personal point of view, I think 2020 has been okay. Actually been okay for me, but yeah, I mean, there's been lots of amazing things that people have been doing. You know, all the key workers that have been working so hard all the way through, you know, and all the NHS workers. So yeah, I think hats off to all those people. It's hugely inspiring.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's probably a culmination, like I say, of all those examples, not just on television back in sort of first lockdown, where everyone was talking a lot more about them, which is really nice to see that on news rather than just all the bad stuff. But also just people in my life, my friends, maybe my community, just people just doing nice things for each other, just literally being lovely and smiling and going for a walk and coming across someone that I don't know on that walk, and them starting to chat to me and having a whole discussion with them for like half an hour about life and what's going on for them, and you know, all that kind of stuff, which I mean I always would try to do anyway, but everyone seems to be a bit more willing to have a chat and to talk to people and to, you know, just kind of that feeling of solidarity, I suppose, has been nice. I also think is it for me, actually, those kind of moments. So the moments that I'll probably remember the most are really simple moments where I've been out for a cycle ride or I've been out for a run and I've got some amazing music in my ears. And
Is it McFly? I was going to say, is it McFly?
It's not McFly, but it could be. Where, you know, you've got a really powerful song, a really happy song, a song with lyrics that really like touch you, and you're cycling and you're at the top of a hill and you put on like Lady Gaga, you know, On the Edge of Glory as you descend the hill on your bike, and you just feel joy. You just feel the energy of joy and of sort of some kind of connection with something, whether or not that's nature or music or yourself. It probably is more about connecting with yourself that's bringing that feeling. But for me, it's those simple things where I've always loved being outside. I've always loved music. I've always loved kind of, you know, exercise and moving. So for me, when you put all those together, it's moments like that I'll remember, of just pure joy and simple things like I used to do when I was little, you know, kind of, you know, walk down to the local co-op and get a packet of pickled onion Monster Munch, you know, and kind of go and sit and eat them in the park.
Was pickled onion always the monster munch of choice?
Yeah, because, you know, when I was commuting, I didn't have so much time to do that. So it's just those simple things that remind you, I think, a lot of your childhood, or a lot of the times when you had, especially in the first lockdown, the weather, you didn't have a place to be necessarily by a certain time. So just getting a little bit of that time back, I think.
Yeah. Do you guys remember Freddos as well? The Freddo
Yeah.
chocolates? Yeah. Like
caramel ones are the best ones.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they used to be like 5p and now they're like what?
About 50p now.
50p or something now.
I remember when
Ridiculous.
polos were 10p. Then they went up to 12p for polos, and I was like, what?
We've got a sweet shop up. Well, we've got a little shop up the road, and they sell lots of what we would class as the penny sweets, but they're now like 5p each.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they're like sherbet dib dabs. I mean, they're about 70p.
Oh, I know.
Outrageous.
Outrageous. So have you guys, I don't really usually do New Year's resolutions, but do you guys have, see, I think what I'm going to try and have this year is I want to take up swimming, because I think that's so, I think from talking to Becky Allington and Ellie Simmons, it just seems to have such a huge impact, not only on your physical health, but your mental well-being as well. Like, it seems to be a big tick in that area. So I think for me, 2021, when we're allowed to, and it's a bit more back to normal hopefully soon, I'll be able to start looking at taking up swimming. I don't know what, if you two guys got any sort of resolutions that you want to think 2021, this is what I want to do next year.
You can go first, Rhada.
That is a hard question. So actually, I try not to make resolutions, because I'm, or not in the traditional sense of sort of January resolutions, or that whole kind of thing. You must change yourself. But I think this year actually, I'm not going to set any resolutions. What I tend to do is more set intentions, which I know sounds really, oh, what's the difference kind of thing. But more like intentions for me are more about the general direction I want to go in, rather than, I think, resolutions, which sometimes I associate that anyway in my head with very specific, sometimes pressurized things. So, and maybe things that for me, like the word intention, it suggests less of a sort of chance to be self-critical if you don't manage it.
Okay.
So for 2021, do you know what, at the moment my intention for 2021 is actually just to stay grounded, stay well, to keep doing all the little things that make me feel good, and to look after myself, and just to get through until things are brighter, or hopefully a little bit more back to normal, and to be kind to myself in terms of not putting too much on myself. But also I've got lots of, I love, as Giles knows, I love doing positive things. I've got lots of ideas for projects, and one of the things that's been good for me this year has been developing more of those and developing more of my ideas. So I'm also just really keen to keep doing things that make me feel happy and do something positive in the world. So I don't know what they are. I used to be a real planner. I used to be a real timetable list kind of person. I've actually given up all those things. Because I think actually I was almost, for me, those things were a little bit of a way to sort of feel like I was in control. So actually I've kind of given those up, because I almost want to step into that, a little bit more of that energy of not trying to control so much, and trying to go more with the flow and see what comes, but to have still intentions about where I want to be, what I want to do, and how I would like to feel as well.
That's funny. That's interesting, actually, because I was thinking sometimes it's quite good to have lists of stuff that you want to do, and like lists of lists of things that you're intending to do, and that, because it gives you kind of almost deadline, but at the same time you kind of you're almost sort of setting yourself up, aren't you, a little bit?
Well, I think sometimes you can be beholden to the list itself, and so the list becomes the outcome rather than actually the energy behind the project or the thing you write on the list. That's what was happened to me.
Well, I remember talking to someone, and they said enjoy it, like the journey is the thing, like actually doing the thing, or the journey. So the end bits normally pretty rubbish compared to the actual process of doing it. So actually thinking of an idea and toying around with it in your head, that's the exciting bit. Actually finishing the thing is actually quite you know, it's quite sad when you finish it. That's like, that gives you sort of a sense of loss and stuff. So I think we need to be more, I guess that's going back to that idea of being in the present a bit more, and enjoying the moment rather than thinking about the Oscar you're going to pick up.
Outcomes. Yeah.
Well, I'm picturing my gold medal in swimming. I mean,
Yeah,
I can see it around your neck right now.
Oh, yes.
Actually.
Yeah. I've had the motivation to do it. But guys, it's been really great talking to you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lawrence.
We'll have to do this again because I really enjoyed chatting to you both. But yeah, here's to a good 2021, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm pressing.